Berserk is a dark fantasy. It's an action series, it's a horror story, a traumatizing psychological experience, but it's also a romance. Not that kind of romance, you. I don't think it's a secret to anyone that I love Berserk. I mean, come on now. But one of the reasons behind that can be best explained through my favorite band, Slipknot. Sorry, Mom and Dad, but Slipknot is a group that can have some of the most brutal, angry, hate-filled, disturbingly loud and descriptive moments, but also moments of beautiful melodies that give a feeling of release and acceptance. Both of these things can be seen as a negative, but when one really looks at them and compares them to the reality of human nature, it isn't negative. It's realistic. Going back to Berserk being a romance, that can be seen most through its Golden Age arc, and even though in past videos I've gone into the relationship between Guts and Casca heavily, there's undoubtedly a relationship we all know that is more important to the theme and narrative of Berserk, and that is Guts and Griffith. A dynamic that's been praised heavily for the contrast between the two characters, but in this video I want to look at what makes them both similar in that way, and more importantly what makes them both equally human before the eclipse. One of Berserk's many inspirations that came from the 70s was Rose of Versailles, a shoujo drama, and that can be largely felt in the Golden Age where romanticism is very prevalent. Romanticism is a form of art that became popular around the late 18th century. It emphasizes childhood and the common man, strong feelings, senses, and emotions in awe of nature, which simply means a fear of respect of nature, the celebration of the individual, importance of imagination, and social classes as well pertaining to medieval times, which, I mean, that explains the whole focus on the common man. The relationship between Guts and Griffith can be explained effectively through this lens, and so the best place to start would be before the two of them even met, a time in one's life where one's imagination runs wild and dreams seem like a certainty. Their childhood. I remember when I was a kid and there were many things I wanted to be, and YouTuber was not one of them, but I'm grateful. Point is that during one's childhood there usually aren't certain realities, like bills, taxes, heartbreak, the feeling of crippling loneliness and existential dread, disappointment. I don't think I need to go on. That stage in life is where one is learning and taking in the world without being fully aware of the dangerous world one lives in. It is blissful ignorance, purity, and naivety. In a normal childhood, one can go outside and play with one's friends on the streets and, most importantly, dream. Now, I know we hate this beautiful bastard with a passion, but Griffith's character arc in Berserk is a tragic story when you really look at it. And I think Miura nailed his desire to show Berserk's conflict as one that goes beyond the realm of simply good versus evil, and he does that well by showing us Griffith in the way that he does. Despite the way we meet Griffith and later on see him at the top of the world for a moment, his origins are of that of a commoner, a boy playing on the street who looks up and sees a castle, not knowing the future that would await him for desiring something he can't have. Miura makes Griffith relatable by doing this, which is a scary but true thought. Griffith at one point was like all of us, someone with a goal and a dream that is far out of his reach. But what makes some people special, and what makes Griffith special, is the ambition and desire to later follow through with the pursuit of said goal and dream. However, in life it is impossible to have great ambitions come true without great dedication and great sacrifice. I believe Griffith, in the context of a medieval commoner, had close to a normal childhood. We don't get an in-depth look to see the relationship he had with others when he was a kid, or memories of his parents, but I think that was done in order to keep the focus on the dream he has had since he was young. Now, I can't really go into Griffith's childhood without at least mentioning the concept of predestination and manipulation of the God Hand. It poses an interesting question. If there is a force that exists above us all and that is pulling the strings, then was Griffith's ambition really his own? And can he be held responsible for his decisions? Personally, I think the answer is yes, as in the world of Berserk, despite current events being the result of the past in this sort of cycle, the responsibility of a man's actions still exists. Deep down, Griffith was still an ambitious soul that simply needed a push, and some people move the needle more than others. Griffith falls into that category, and some can even exist slightly outside the realm of causality. Now, even though I said I wanted to focus on the similarities between the two, I can't properly address that without talking about the differences. It's inevitable. We don't get a deep look into Griffith's childhood, and as I said earlier, because of that, we can mostly assume it wasn't far from the norm for that time. The same cannot be said about Guts. Born from the dead corpse of his mother, adopted by a prostitute who died when he was the age of 3, and since the age of 5 he was trained as a mercenary to kill. The rest of his years he would spend on the battlefield, thrown into a man's world as a boy. Now, I'm not going to get into the situation with Donovan as a whole, as I've spoken on how that pertains to his eventual relationship with Casca, but it is worth mentioning. Since if killing other people wasn't already enough to rob a child of their innocence, Guts was also robbed of his purity at the age of 9. showing Guts from a very early age that the battlefield is a place he can never truly escape from. And as a child would hold on to a teddy bear for comfort and solace, Guts holds his sword. the only thing that can protect him from the evils of a world he has been thrown into immediately. While Griffith was playing out on the street dreaming of getting a castle and being the ruler of his own kingdom, Guts was being told by his adopted father that he was a curse, and that he was sold off to another man and that he should be dead. Fending for his own life, killing the only semblance of a father he had in his life and running away for his own, soon to be surrounded by a pack of wolves which he had to protect himself from with the only thing he has and knows how to use, his sword. I've avoided the word up to this point, but the word is survival. The reason a healthy home and family is essential is to provide and teach a kid the skills, knowledge, and emotional maturity and stability to the best of one's ability needed to survive in the world. But when one is still a kid, that's the stage to dream, to live naively in the world without certain worries, and without having to confront cruel realities. Guts was not fortunate to have that. All he knew since he was born, and the only thing he had time to do, was survive. Now, it is important to note that this story does take place in medieval times, and the age for when someone was considered a man is very different from today, as soon Griffith would pursue his ambitions and learn the harsh world he lived in. In fact, growing up poor taught him some of that already, but Griffith stepped into a dangerous and battlefield life by choice to pursue his ambition. And on the other hand, Guts was thrown into a battlefield life since birth. This is a very stark contrast, as Griffith's childhood is brief and normal, and Guts is shown to us the reader in heartbreaking level of detail, outlining the miserable childhood he had. But the similarity here and in some future scenes where they're together is the innocence. At this stage in their life, they are only doing what they are allowed to do, neither yet with the ability to push life in the direction they want. Neither of them understand how they feel and why, and both of them are clear demonstrations of what a human is. Something with the desire to survive, and something with the ability to dream of an existence beyond surviving. By the time both of them meet, Griffith has strongly been forging a path with the Band of the Hawk as the leader and beacon of this mercenary group, and Guts has been taking bounties, if you will, living and surviving day by day. Both of their lives would forever change, and the meeting between these two would spark a change for the entire world. When Griffith meets Guts for the first time, I think his sentiments towards Guts can be interpreted a certain way, and even though I clearly understand why, I think it misses the point. You see, Griffith is a character that for the majority of the Golden Age arc, we don't know the inner thoughts and feelings of. In fact, it's largely through his actions, facial expressions, and word of mouth of others that we really get an idea who he is a majority of the time. However, the moments where Griffith does speak of his true feelings is where the romanticism shows. His feelings are strong, loud, and clear when expressed. So in this scene where Griffith tells Guts, "I want you," he is being as direct and honest as he can be. He had just seen Guts wipe out Bezuso and manhandle some of his own, and someone with the dream of acquiring a kingdom, why wouldn't you want someone like that? Quick side note, why is it in all the Berserk dojins Guts is the bottom? Griffith sees Guts in this moment like he sees the rest of the Band of the Hawk, a tool for him to use. Okay, I guess that answers my previous question. Griffith at this point sees Guts as the rest of the people around him, things he can use to get closer and closer to his dream. Guts, upon meeting Griffith, gets to know somewhat about who he is by the other members of the Band of the Hawk, and how they talk about him. I think the way Judo describes Griffith is not only perfect for Griffith now, but remains true throughout the rest of the story. Quote, "How can I put this? Just when you think it looks like he's got some strange wisdom, he seems just like a kid. Just when you think he has a spine-chilling look on his face, he smiles innocently like a baby. Is he a child or an adult? A good guy or a villain? I don't really know what he is." This describes not only Griffith's character, but could also serve as some real mind-blowing foreshadowing of the Moonlight Child. Beyond this, Griffith is painted as this great man full of ambition and a leader the rest clearly look up to. But I think the words Judo used stick out a lot. I think a scene that further amplifies Griffith's childlike nature still is the water fight. Again, Mira being a genius by showing us Griffith in such an innocent state. I mean, come on, look at him. It's like when a mom is being told by the principal her kid broke someone else's nose. What's even more interesting is the use of nudity in this scene, as in other scenes with Casca, these are moments where Griffith is being himself, or to put it more clearly, his true self. So in the way that I think Guts sees Griffith is very different from the rest of the Band of the Hawk. Unlike everybody else who looked up to Griffith in adoration, Guts met Griffith by walking up to him and punching him in the face again and again and again and again and again. So just keep that in mind. Guts is told of Griffith's dream and sees firsthand how capable of a leader he is and how willing he is to do anything to accomplish that. The fire that is Griffith that continues to grow and grow in front of Guts' eyes. But in the meantime, as Guts is focused on the dream he has been presented by Griffith, there is something deep down within Griffith that is happening. Before we can go back and address the way Griffith sees Guts, it's important to discuss his dream and his actions around that, as if you understand that, you understand Griffith. If there's one big takeaway from Griffith, it is that he is a character that is willing to do anything for his dream. Well, almost anything, you see. When Judah describes Griffith as still like a child, this rings very true in the fact that Griffith is living in a fantasy world. Griffith has the harsh reality that his men will die, so in order to progress in the world and avoid that, he gives his body to a sick, twisted man. Something we see in the moment he clearly hates and views himself as unclean for, but it's a necessary thing to do. Griffith does everything he can in order to grow empowered to avoid the consequences of pursuing his great ambition. Eventually he becomes numb and accepting of the reality of war and brushes off the guilt by simply saying that he doesn't really force them to join, until he meets Guts. That's what sparks Casca's jealousy, the fact that Griffith had never said or done anything like he has done for anyone else but Guts. It's important to remind ourselves that Griffith, throughout the majority of the Golden Age arc, is still human. Could you imagine how lonely it is having to put on this image of perfection for others in order to drive them towards your goal? But with Guts, Griffith doesn't have to do that. Now, do I think Griffith tries to use Guts as a tool? Yes, and his childlike possessiveness is fully on display and continues to be on display throughout the Golden Age arc. But deep down, through the multiple times Griffith goes on to save Guts and the half-hearted answer he gives as to why, it's very clear that from the moment they met, Griffith sees Guts as more than just another soldier, but as someone who can be his equal and an escape from the consequences of his dream. Because it will only be until his dream comes true that his actions of evil will be justified. But inside, that's something that bothers Griffith. This is obvious when he asks Guts if he's cruel, when he scratches himself. As I said earlier in the video, Griffith is someone who is hard to pinpoint in terms of how he is feeling, but that cover fully comes off around Guts. The moments of innocence and expression of feeling about his dream, and also his interactions with Guts, paint a very clear picture. Griffith is human, but in order to achieve his goal, he has to suppress the other feelings that make him human, deny them in pursuit of the god called Dream, and slowly become something other than human in the form of a man. But Guts allows Griffith to escape that reality and remain human. The reason why is, unlike Casca and the others around him, Guts is the only one who treats him like a person, and not the perfect icon. There is a clear inner conflict with Griffith, and that is the child who wants to be loved and accepted while pursuing his goal, and the thing he knows he has to be in order to get there. Balance is important in a person's life, and it's an honest moment of admission here, but I'm also guilty of trying to pretend like pursuing success will make me whole. But it hasn't. What good is it to climb the tallest mountain and remain there alone? My favorite movie, Scarface, is a great reference, by the way, but ironically, the ability to dream is human, but Griffith's chase for that dream slowly took away his humanity. Only Guts can make him feel like he's still a person, not the great white hawk that everybody sees him as. Someone who can reassure him when things go wrong, and someone he can open up to. And that is a true friend. The only one Griffith has and refuses to lose, whether he sees it or not. Guts questions Griffith and why he goes out of his way for him, but ultimately accepts what's on the surface. But also deep down throughout the time they spend together has developed a friendship with Griffith. Sadly, those feelings are crushed after Guts assassinates Julius and goes to find Griffith, only to catch him mid-conversation with Charlotte about what a friend is to him, in a chapter called Precious Thing. What I think a friend is one who is my equal. Those are the words that stick with Guts. It's interesting how earlier in the chapter it begins with Griffith talking about this idea of a dream, and in his own words, for no other sake, to accomplish it for him, for himself. A dream. He then goes on a monologue talking about devoting one's life as a martyr to the god named Dream. The word martyr is very intentional, and Griffith is clearly talking about himself with saying it. A martyr is someone who suffers or dies for their faith. Griffith is suffering and killing himself in an emotional sense to the god named Dream, with the faith that by pursuing this dream, he will be made whole. Then Charlotte brings up the Band of the Hawk, and once again Griffith opens up. I think Griffith sees Charlotte as someone he can share this with because she poses no threat to him. He then says the quote mentioned earlier of a friend being someone who goes after their own dream, even if it puts them against himself, someone he can see as an equal. Guts hearing these words now feels as if he is beneath Griffith, and the visuals of Guts being at the bottom of the steps is a really nice touch. Do I think Griffith could have said these things looking at Guts in the eye, knowing he was there? Well, that's an interesting question. For Guts, however, he is now confronted with the reality of his, a reality that comes from his childhood, and that is Guts has no goal, no real purpose, no dream. The relationship he has with Griffith and what he and the Band of the Hawk represent in his life is put into words perfectly in The Bonfire of Dreams. The Bonfire of Dreams is another great example of romanticized expression. Even Casca in the scene says Guts is talking like a princess. But still, the dialogue is perfect for Guts in that moment. After killing 100 men and resting on the top of the hill, Casca goes to tend to Guts. And through their conversation, we see Guts open up about how he feels about his amazing feat. But he's also applying it to the lifestyle he's been living. Here we get a demonstration of strong emotions, imaginations, and the celebration of the individual. There are many scenes in Berserk that stand out, but The Bonfire of Dreams is among one of the most important in the entire series. It does a few things all at once. The first thing is it does illustrate the relationship between the members of the Band of the Hawk and Griffith, comparing each and every one of them symbolically to a fire, and that each of those fires is added to an even greater flame that is Griffith. The second thing it does is it opens up Guts as a character to Casca in the audience, as she previously stated a misconception that bothered Guts greatly, accusing him of being a mad dog that didn't care for his men. Well, now I bet she feel real stupid since Guts goes on to detail the dreams of his men having a life beyond the war they're currently fighting in. But the third thing it does, which is what really opens up Guts as a character and his growth throughout this arc, is the realization of who he is when put next to the rest of the Hawk. Earlier, comparing each individual as a flame that as a collective adds to the flame that is Griffith, Guts, off the back of the words Griffith said to Charlotte, has come to grips with the sad reality that he does not have a fire of his own. So despite being in the Band of the Hawk, we really get a feeling of separation from Guts, which is something Casca picks up at the end of the chapter when she asks Guts if he's leaving. Guts in this scene alludes to his life since childhood, a life that has only been up to this point about surviving day by day, and the only reason he fights is because he doesn't want to die, a very natural human desire. But he knows that beyond that he has nothing. One of the all-time favorite sayings in Berserk, one that puts into light who Guts is when he says, "My flame ain't here. As for me, maybe I'm just warming myself up by that campfire for a bit. Maybe I just stopped in by chance." This is the turning point for Guts' character in the Golden Age arc, and what would set everything else into motion. Griffith was a boy with a dream who grew up to push aside what made him human in pursuit of that dream. Guts was a boy with no dream, one that only knew how to survive, and now he is becoming a man who is ready to go out in search of a dream. Currently, Berserk is being taken care of by Koji Mori, the author behind one of my favorite manga of all time, Holy Land, and his inspiration for his protagonist Yu Kamishiro was Miura himself, and his obsessive attention to detail. Miura, on the other hand, used Koji Mori as inspiration for Griffith. In fact, it was their friendship that was a reference for the friendship between Guts and Griffith, which as a Berserk fan and a Holy Land fan, it's really cool to know that. But I also have a few questions. The desire to constantly be on the same level as the other can be seen. I believe even before the Bonfire of Dreams scene, Guts was already equal to Griffith, but in a very different way. Both have doubts about the life they live and deal with feelings of self-hatred. Griffith sees himself as unclean, and Guts has been told that he is a curse, something he was reminded of in the moment that he killed Adonis, and later on had a bit of a nightmare. Both deal with feelings of isolation, one from his status as this great icon, and the other with nothing to claim as his own. Casca has really questionable choices and romantic interests, but understandable at the same time. In a way, Guts and Griffith have always been equal because of the flaws that make them human, but after Guts reaches his turning point, he then becomes an equal to Griffith by Griffith's standards, something we see on the snowy hill when Guts is on his way to leave the Band of the Hawk. In the chapter titled Morning Departure, things come full circle, with Guts and Griffith coming face to face one more time. Wait, let me reword that. After being face to face as the sun rises, as the two of them whip out their swords, damn it! Guts and Griffith meet once again, but this time, unlike their first encounter when Griffith was on top, you know what, forget it. They are now equals as Griffith is a man chasing after his dream, and Guts is now someone who is leaving to find one. Here, they are both a representation of mankind in its purest form, as some have purpose and others are still finding one. But in the end, both are chasing after the same thing, something that will validate their existence in life. I think the words of Corcus in this scene are very important. Corcus is leaving his jealousy out on full display, but his words are interesting. I don't buy it. You ain't special. You can never become Griffith. However, something Casca points out later in Wounds, Guts already has. He is no longer someone bound to Griffith's dream, but someone who is chasing after his own even if he hasn't found it. We also see Guts thinking of the words Judo said about being with Casca and holding her, the possibility that maybe there, he can find his purpose. Something that also comes full circle in Wounds. In this moment, Guts is grateful, but he has to set out to find his flame, something that he hasn't found here with them. In his mind, he is only another soldier to Griffith, but the war is over, and Griffith is well on his way to accomplishing his dream, so he will be fine, despite the bonds the two of them have developed. He swings his blade, and unlike last time, now Guts is not just equal to Griffith, but has risen above his dream. He is now a man that will do all he can to find his dream, even if that puts him in direct opposition to Griffith. Guts is changed, but as Judo points out, change is beginning to occur in someone else as well, and that's Casca, as even she realizes that when she wants Guts to stay, and things to remain the way they have been as of recent. Now everything is on the line, and even if Griffith will grow to resent Guts, this is something he has to do. In order to become Griffith's equal and friend, he has to go. The two engage and Guts comes on top. Oh my god. But now he is free to pursue his dream, and inside he expresses his sentiments regarding Griffith's defeat. It's alright. It's like stumbling on a rock on the roadside. It's petty, a small thing. The place you want to go is more distant, farther off. So it's alright. You'll stand up, and you'll start walking. Soon. Guts believes that in the end he means nothing more to Griffith, and that just like everything else, this is nothing but a minor inconvenience that he will move on from. This could not be further from the truth. Griffith in this scene is going through many, many emotions. Rejection, anger, fear, and this is where I want to go back to Judo's words when describing Griffith. Here we see his childlike possessiveness. On the surface, speaking to Guts once again as if he was nothing but his property, but deep down Guts is his closest friend. His only friend. But the irony of all of this is that it was his own words that prompted Guts to have the desire to leave him. If Griffith loses, he is being denied his one escape from the horrors of his dream. He is being humbled in front of his closest comrades after a streak of nothing but victories. He will be forced to realize and come to the reality that Guts is his equal. But most importantly, while realizing that, he will be losing his only friend. Left behind to continue the lonely journey of pursuing his dream as the White Hawk, and the resolve he senses from Guts infuriates him more. From his perspective, Guts is determined to leave him behind without knowing the true reason why. And here, that evil nature mixes with that childlike possessiveness of his, as he even considers killing Guts, because if he can't have him, then no one can. But all of this is the result of his inability to admit to Guts the friendship he has had with him. Yes, the eclipse happens essentially because Guts wants to be Griffith's friend, and Griffith was being a little tsundere twink who wouldn't admit that he saw Guts as a friend all along. But in the end, Griffith is on his knees. You know what? I can't. I quit. Forced to accept his defeat, and this event sets in motion the event that would forever change the both of them. In the aftermath of their departure, Guts comes to think of the time before the Band of the Hawk when he wandered alone, and wondered if he was discarding something important in the chase for a dream that he might not even need. In fact, it wasn't until he heard Griffith's words that he had the idea to leave, but regardless, that was yesterday. And now he must live in the present for the future. On the other hand, Griffith has done everything but move on. When he was feeling doubt, he could open up to Guts and be reassured. But now Guts is gone. The only person that he ever put before his dream. His solution is to self-indulge himself in pleasure and in order to try and forget, forcing himself on Charlotte as a way to feel in control again. Something he does later on when he gets on top of Casca. But in his mind, all he can think about is Guts. You see, you're not really homies unless you're thinking about your bro while being in bed with a girl. After the deed, Griffith holds himself in the darkness, the same pose used when he's being reborn as Femto. Guts was the only one that gave him escape, but now he has nothing left than to become the thing he needs to be in order to fulfill his dream. I've talked about the eclipse many times, and that scene that follows is simply the result of a romance. A romance between a woman with a thing for great men with a few screws loose, a Chad with an existential crisis, and a femboy who is really bad at being honest. Berserk is a romance. No homo.